Then, you may remember, an Israeli commentator spoke of the increasing hostility of the Netanyahu government to Israel's own protesters who are calling for a return of the hostages. Well, today that hostility turned into violent clashes between the Israeli police and protesters. Yesterday, I told you I had a glimmer of optimism that some kind of deal might be on the way. Well, today, I'm afraid, not for the first time, the Israeli Prime Minister has stamped on that flicker of hope, saying earlier on that Israel would attack the last Palestinian town in the far south of Gaza, the refugee-crammed Rafah. Israel, said Mr. Netanyahu, will enter Rafah and we will eliminate the Hamas battalions there, whether or not there is a deal, in order to achieve total victory. So does that put paid to any possible deal? You would think so, but I'm joined now by the Palestinian Ambassador in London, Husam Zomlot. Ambassador, this seems like a very, very hardline statement by Netanyahu just at the most sensitive moment. Do you think it was designed to ensure that these talks do not succeed?
Of course, Netanyahu is doing what he does best. He's maneuvering, he's evading, he's lying. He wants this war to continue at any cost. He knows this genocidal aggression is his only hope to stay in power. And he hears the hundreds of thousands of Israelis in the streets shouting for him to resign. He knows he will end up in jail, actually, should this genocide ends in Gaza. And he has Smotrich and Ben Gvir and all these fanatics around him in his coalition who is pushing him in that direction. And we've just heard from them yesterday and the day before that they will collapse his government if he doesn't go all the way and finish off whatever left of Gaza, because
yes,
much of
these
Gaza,
extreme right-wing groups.
Of course,
yes.
But that's the making of his, and therefore a ceasefire is needed, and immediate and permanent, and that can only be enforced by the international community. You have 90 days since the ruling of the International Court of Justice that ruled straightforwardly that this has got to stop immediately. 30 days after the UN Security Council resolution for an immediate ceasefire, I believe now is the time that we put the full force of international community to actually bring about a ceasefire, because leaving it to Netanyahu is going to lead us where we have just discussed.
And so those things that we were talking about on the show yesterday about, for instance, Palestinians being allowed back into the north of Gaza, about the Israeli troops on the corridor in the middle of Gaza cutting off, being withdrawn, all of that you think was just a piece of game playing by the Israelis, was never going to happen?
Yes, they are trying to spread to the world that they are being flexible, but in effect, they are just continuing this war, spreading information that they have been so flexible and compromising and offered concession, when in fact on the table, when we see all this, we see no such a thing. It's very disingenuous way of just blaming everybody. Netanyahu wants to blame everybody. I did it, but the US didn't give me what I need. I did it, but Hamas was not cooperating, all that. But the real plan is that they are building military bases in Gaza. They are redrawing the infrastructure in Gaza in a way to ensure some sort of a permanent military presence for Israel.
And you were talking earlier on, Ambassador, about the international community. And obviously, in terms of pressure on the Israeli government, it is coming from outside. So your reflections, there are two countries I think we need to talk about in particular. One is Riyadh, the Saudis, who could be possibly Israel's longer-term allies in the region, depending on what Israel does next. And the other is, of course, the United States, where Joe Biden, he's got an election coming up. He doesn't want to push things too far in terms of his own electorate. Just your sense of where that pressure is coming from now.
There's no pressure. Netanyahu doesn't feel any pressure. He hears a lot of words. He hears some cries, statements, but he doesn't see any deeds and any action. I mean, the U.S. provides Israel with every piece of weapon, with all that Israel was allowed to destroy Gaza and kill and maim more than 100,000 people, mostly women and children. And the moment Netanyahu starts receiving some sort of actions, consequences, the moment he has the U.S. or the U.K. or major backers of Israel would stop exporting arms to this war criminal. And the moment they realize that the world is supporting another vision, another direction, which is recognizing a state of Palestine, allowing us to be a full member in the UN. And you've seen last week the U.S. exercise its veto power over admitting Palestine, which is such a contradiction, inconsistency with its own policy of a two-state solution. So no, the U.S. Is to be blamed. There is such a dismal failure of the way the U.S. administration has dealt with Israel over the last few years.
And you mentioned the UK there. We've seen these very big demonstrations for Palestine all across the UK, particularly in London recently. In terms of what a British government could do, what you would like a British government to do, is stopping arms sales the first thing?
Not what I would like them to do. This is what they must do. This is the UK domestic law. This is the UK responsibilities under international law. And this is what the UK Foreign Office lawyers are saying, that Israel is in breach of international law, and therefore it is an obligation upon the UK government to immediately revoke the license of exporting arms to a country that is committing genocide as we speak, especially in light of the ruling at the ICJ. And it's clear that it's not just Israel that is officially in trial, but all other third parties that are complicit with this genocide. So yes, the UK must do so, and there was a process for that, and I believe that process should conclude very soon.
We talk a lot about Gaza, and rightly so, the famine that is beginning to spread there, and the disease and all the rest of it. But what is the situation overall in the West Bank at the moment?
It's horrible. It's absolutely horrible. You have settler violence on the rise. Literally militias, terror militias in the rampage, sponsored, supported by the army, going around villages, burning cars and houses. You have still the expansion of the settlements. I'm sure you followed the last chunk of land they literally took away from the West Bank. This project of colonial settlement is expanding. The West Bank is dotted with all these settlements, checkpoints, walls, and the killings are continuing. You have got the highest level and number of Palestinians killed in the West Bank in any given year.
Finally, it's often said, obviously, Hamas cannot provide leadership anymore and should not, given what's happened, but there needs to be a new or alternative Palestinian leadership emerging during this period. Where do you think that's going to come from?
From the people of Palestine. We have our national institutions. We have the state that is recognized by the majority of the world, and the UK is too late for that. It should recognize the state of Palestine. That's a right for us, not just a gift or a favor of the UK. And, the history and the Balfour Declaration, this is a correction of history, but also it's a push in the right direction for a recognition. And I believe this is a moment when we think about national institutions for the Palestinians, including the PLO that represents all Palestinians, that is able to unite the geography, the West Bank and Gaza, including East Jerusalem, and the polity, the Palestinian people, and convene national elections. And I believe we are capable to do so. So the people of Palestine will decide on such matters.